Today on Upfront, a new idea for solving the state's highway funding dilemma. A top Republican suggests a fee on heavy trucks, only to see it hit an immediate roadblock. Where does this leave the transportation budget? I'll be asking Assembly Majority Leader Jim Steineke next on Upfront. Then the Taiwanese company that makes iPhones. Wisconsin in the running for a Foxconn factory and thousands of jobs. Plus, the high school English teacher who hopes to unseat House Speaker Paul Ryan.
Covering the issues important to Wisconsin. This is Upfront with Mike Goucher.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Upfront. State lawmakers and the governor had hoped to have the next two-year state budget on the books by July 1st, this weekend. But it's not happening just yet. After a rough start to the week, budget talks between Assembly and Senate leaders and the governor seem to make a little progress, but lawmakers still need to reach agreement on how to pay for the state's transportation needs. Speaker Robin Vos is now backing the idea of a fee on heavy trucks to raise more money to fix roads, but that has run into opposition from the state's leading business lobby and now 5 state senators. We're talking more about this and the state of the state budget with Republican Assembly Majority Leader Jim Steineke. Representative, good to have you back on the program.
Thanks, Mike. Good to be here.
So for a while last week, it looked like there might be some progress, that maybe this fee on heavy trucks could lead to an agreement on transportation. But as of right now, that looks much more doubtful.
Well, I think as we go through this process, some people are going to have issues with any particular solution that comes up. So we have to continue to work through it. I know the Senate has their own ideas, the Assembly has theirs. We're going to have to come to some kind of agreement, or we're going to end up at the base budget from 2 years ago. So if that's the way we're heading, I think it's a disservice to the state, but it's better than putting more costs on the credit card that we can't afford. And
explain to viewers out there, when you say the base budget, what would that mean in terms of projects, work on projects? What would it mean?
Yeah, it basically means that we don't spend more than we spent in the last 2-year budget cycle. And that means long term, in the short term, over the course of the next couple of years, there will be projects that don't get let for bids. There will be some projects where the work stops, maybe down here in southeastern Wisconsin, and other things that just get delayed. So it's not an ideal scenario, but in the Assembly, we just don't believe we should be spending more than what we're taking in.
Not an ideal scenario, a real possibility, though? Would you say it's a real possibility?
Well, if the Senate can't come to some agreement on how to handle the future of transportation funding, I think it is a real possibility. What I find striking in the comments that these 5 senators made is they keep talking about not wanting to infuse new revenue into the Department of Transportation. But yet they're proposing $850 million of new revenue through borrowing to go into DOT. We're proposing an even less amount of spending or revenue authority going into DOT, but we're saying we should pay for some of it. So it's kind of ironic that they're willing to borrow and spend, but they don't want to pay as you go.
Part of their argument is there should be more analysis of how the DOT is spending money. They're just not convinced that it's been spent wisely in the past, that it could be tightened up a lot. Has there been enough attention, for example, from the Assembly to that concern?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I agree with them. I think there's ways that we can reform it, but I don't think there's anybody out there that says we can solve the $1 billion deficit in transportation through just some reforms on their own. I've always believed that reforms have to come first. So in any transportation package, I'd like to see the reforms as well as a long-term solution, or at least a short-term solution, that actually pays for these projects as we go, rather than continuing to put them on the credit card.
So Senator Fitzgerald, the Senate Majority Leader, says if you've got these 5 senators, it's not going to happen. It's dead. Do you agree? Is it dead, or does the governor need to get involved in this and have another conversation about it?
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful if the governor got involved and let everybody know where his position is. Again, I find it a strange argument that the 5 senators are okay with $850 million in bonding, but they're not okay with less spending and actually paying for it as you go. So it's just kind of an odd argument for me to square in my head here.
Do you feel like you're back to square one on the transportation budget, given these developments?
Hopefully not. I mean, all along the Assembly has proposed solution after solution after solution, and all we keep hearing from some senators is no, but no real solid plan coming back, other than running up the state's credit card to pay for things. So I hope we can continue to talk. I'm confident that at some point we'll come to come to an agreement, but it's going to take both sides giving a little.
At some point you'll come to an agreement. You have any idea of when that might be, or is that just impossible to predict?
Well, I was optimistic up until a few minutes ago that we'd be coming to an agreement in relatively short order. I still think that can happen, but we really need to get everybody on board, and people cannot lay down ultimatums. That's just not how government works. If you're going to govern, you need to be willing to compromise with the other side, because, and in this case, the other side is other Republicans. It's not even Democrats we're compromising with. So we need to sit down. We need to figure this out.
A final question, different topic. You tweeted this past week in response to the president's tweets about the MSNBC hosts Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough. You were not a fan of his tweet. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I think it demeans the office of the presidency. I've got 3 young kids at home, and I'm always talking about how whether we agree or disagree with the president that's in office, we should always respect the office itself. And I think that's the hardest thing to explain now to my kids as they see some of these things coming out of the president's Twitter feed, is how do we respect a president or the office when that person doesn't respect others? And
the argument is he's a fighter, that he's fighting fire with fire. He was criticized by them, and he's firing back.
Yeah, and I think there's ways to do that without launching personal attacks. And I think the president should be above this. I mean, these are personal issues or personal attacks that just have no place in politics. And as we saw in Arlington with the Steve Scalise shooting, we have a responsibility as elected officials to raise the level of debate and to try to calm the unrest that's going on in the country between the two sides. And I just don't think that this serves that well.
Jim Steineke is the Assembly Majority Leader, Republican. It's good to have you back on the program. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Mike.
When we come back, could thousands of new jobs be coming to Wisconsin? A Taiwanese electronics giant wants to build a plant in the U.S. We'll be asking if our state is seriously in the running. That's next on Upfront. And later, a new candidate in the 1st Congressional District. So who is Kathy Myers, and why does she think she can defeat House Speaker Paul Ryan?
Up Front with Mike Goucher, brought to you by the American Transmission Company and the Wisconsin Corn Growers Association.